Hi, I'm Will Marshall. I'm at Pyramind in San Francisco today, and I'm here to show you a technique I use all the time in my production called sample morphing. And sample morphing is a way of having an individual sample in a musical sense. I'd say very commonly a clap sample, but it's by no means restricted to claps. You can do this to anything. But a single sample in a musical sense that happens all the time, but creating a version of that sample or kind of a MIDI interpretation of that sample that can be evolved either automatically or manually. Now to set this up in Ableton is really simple. What we've got here is a clap sample. It sounds like this. And we have that, rather than load it into the default sampler, I've put it into sampler because sampler can have multiple samples loaded in at once. Now, this clap is nice. I would use this in my own production. But if I wanted to sample morph it, that way I could have the clap kind of constantly evolve and change, and I could manipulate that changing to fit in with whatever track I was producing. So the way to do this very quickly and easily is open up our zone section here. And our zone section here in Ableton Sampler lets us have multiple samples loaded into Sampler. This can be used in a lot of different ways, but in this case, we're just going to use it to essentially fade between multiple samples to cause sample morphing. We're going to go into a set of claps here, and we're going to try and find a clap that is in line with the sample that we're already using. Not the same, obviously, but not totally different either. I'm going to grab this one here. Now, the first thing I would do, and this is kind of personal preference, is ba 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 ba. I feel like these two samples are out of tune with each other. So what I'm going to do is play with the tuning, which is here, with the second sample. Now I feel like they're in tune with each other. They're just locked together more. Now you could try and do that by, calculating the exact pitch of the clap, insofar as claps have a pitch, and trying to tune them that way. But personally, I just hit the up and down button on the transpose control here until it sounds right, because it's not necessarily going to be the same pitch. It might be a fourth or a fifth or some other musical interval, but that way I get a good result quickly without having to think about it too much. So now we're playing both samples at the same time, which sounds different from, there's kind of an additional layer of complexity I really like here. Now, instead of playing these two samples at the same time, what we're going to want to do is kind of crossfade between them. And the way we would do that easily, and there are a few options I'll show you in a sec, but the easiest way of doing that is to go into the selector here and just hit either the distribute ranges equally function, which allows us to then use the sample selector here to control which sample is being played. Right? And instead of doing that, we might want to crossfade the two samples. I'm going to do a curve like this. I kind of just eyeball this. It's fine. A little too thick in the middle. And now I can kind of move around this area here and get kind of a constant evolution of the clap sound. So that's great. Now, how would you approach this? How would you control this? There are kind of three obvious ways to me of controlling the sample morphing. Now, the first is literally just to automate this. So you could, show automation in a new layer in arrangement view and just automate it in a sample morphing. However, I think that's a little bit inorganic. Like, that's not my favorite approach to doing something like this. The next option would be to put the sample selector control here on an LFO. And we could do that very easily in Sampler by clicking the modulation. I'm going to take this LFO. We're going to turn retrigger off so the LFO doesn't start over and over again every time. Otherwise, you'll get the same position every time. I'm going to slow down the rate a bunch. And, oh, not this LFO. See, this LFO only has a limited number of things it can be assigned to. So we're going to turn off LFO 1, grab LFO 2, turn off retrigger. And here, you'll see the first option in the dropdown is the sample selector. I'm going to drag that up. Not too much, because I'm not trying to get all the way to either end. I always want a degree of blending between the two sounds. It's just I want the ratios to kind of shift around. And now we'll bring the frequency down and See how the clap, each time we hit it, is playing a subtly different sound, but in a rhythmic way. Right now it's, you know, at 0.96 hertz, but we could beat sync that if that's what we wanted. So we get a more regular kind of morphing of the sound. We could also have it randomly change each time. Now the way to have something randomly change with these LFOs is to put them in sample and hold. And sample and hold basically gives you a new value of the LFO. It's a new random value based on the increment here. So if you've got on, I think this is 1 bar here, and you're on sample and hold, then it will give you a new random value every bar. Now that's not what we want, right? We actually want a new value every time we hit the key. So what you can do is put it on hertz and bring it all the way down, which means it's, you know, 0.01 hertz. It's going to take a long time to change value. But then put retrigger back on. And if retrigger is back on, it means the sample and hold LFO is re-triggered each time you hit a key, and it produces a new random value. And this means every single snare hit or clap hit is going to be randomly different. Now, personally, I don't tend to use this so much because I find the randomness of it is a little out of control. Like sometimes you get kind of the same sound 3 or 4 times in a row and then you get a very different sound. It doesn't produce a consistently different tone. So if I'm going to use LFOs, I personally prefer to use the kind of a sine wave slowly moving. And for me personally, typically an unsynced sine wave, because I'm a big fan of just unsynced things that aren't lined up with musical grids. It helps take us out of that loopy, kind of overly precise way of thinking about music that I think can be very limiting. So those are kind of your 2 options there. And the third option, if we turn this LFO off, is to have manual control over the tone. The quick way of doing that, for me, would be to use this mod wheel that we have on the Control S49 here. We're going to go into our MIDI section, and you'll see when I control this mod wheel, the mod wheel light here flashes. And we're going to do pretty much the same thing. Assign that mod wheel to the sample selector. And so now you can go through your track and you can actually use the mod wheel to dynamically morph your sample in any way you want. A couple of additions to this. Sometimes when you morph the sample, there can be points in the layering where the sample feels a little bit weak. And something I really like to do personally to deal with that is add a third clap sound that is consistently there regardless of the kind of volume of the underlying sounds or the other 2 sounds. So I'm going to take that one. I actually like it. Convenient that it's the first one I tried. And now you can hear it provides a degree of consistency. I would personally turn it down. We can do that by going into the sample mode, and you can see each sample has its own volume control. So we can turn down this third clap quite a bit. And so there you have it, a constantly morphing clap that sounds consistent enough to be, you know, musically useful, but different enough to keep you interested, and it can be modulated via the mod wheel however you like. I'm Will Marshall. Thanks for watching Pyramind. For more videos like this, please subscribe to our channel. Thank you.
If you're a music producer, subscribe to our channel and stay up to date on the latest Pyramind tutorial videos, track breakdowns, elite sessions, and more. Visit us at pyramind.com.